So this is Overheating 101. Overheating is basically the art of temporary superpowers in Eve. We're going to go about this class a little bit backwards today. Because overheating doesn't deal with any one set of specific modules, it deals with pretty much everything in the game. I'm going to talk about some of the whens and whats of overheating before we get to skills. Modules, in this case, are sort of tied in with the tactics since there's no one module involved. By the way, feel free to type questions in class channel or shout them out. Yell at me if I start talking too fast, which I very often do. So the general purpose of overheating a module in Eve is pretty much the same as the goal of overheating something in the real world. You want to push an item past the manufacturer's recommended usages until you fry your eyebrows off and you have a lump of smoking metal. In other ways, it's a way to gain temporary bonuses for a given module or the whole rack, if you so chose, but there's a physical penalty attached, in this case, damage to the weapon or any module. The general rule of thumb is that overheating is a panic and or win button. You ace up your sleeve as opposed to something that's always on. It's not like you just turn your overheating on and let it go for 10 minutes. It's because if you kept it on all the time, you'd burn it out flat in no time. It's generally, with a couple of exceptions, a PvP mechanism over a PvE mechanism because most fights will be over before you burn your module out. PvP fights in Eve, when not mass fleet slugfests or structure warfare, are really very quick, and overheating a module might be the key to winning it faster. So we'll get straight into some examples of common times to overheat some. Your afterburner or your micro warp drive, you might overheat when you really need to make that hero point or to get out of point range quickly, or you need to burn back to a gate before your helmet melts. Running quickly through EFT, an overloaded micro warp drive will for 4 or 5 cycles outperform a full snake set of implants, which is really quite huge. Speaking of hero points, some will overload a point module, especially on an interceptor or some of the other boats with warp special bonuses to point range already, with a 20% range bonus to warp disruptors or scrams on top of whatever the ship bonus is. So, for example, tossed together Arazu, which has inherent point bonuses, overheating, you can point someone out to 57 kilometers. Rumbly voice in the background, that's the other half doing whatever it is that he's doing. Right. Or another example, you're caught and the only way to get out is the gate and you're webbed out the wazoo. So you overheat your micro warp drive isn't going to do you any good anyway. Here you'd turn on your overheating Kung Fu 2 or tank modules to push your resist higher and let you last that little bit longer. Alternately, you're the aggressor and you want to put your target down really fast. You might overheat your guns to gain a rate of firing bonus. For example, rail guns gain a 15% bonus in firing times. Other variants will have different bonuses. Blasters, for example, give a 15% damage bonus. You'll want to check exactly what bonus your guns have so that you know how it's going to affect your ship. For example, faster rate of fire means you're hitting more often and performing more damage. But you also have 10% more ammo consumption to make up for it, and if you're cap dependent, it also eats your cap 15% faster, on top of taking heat damage from your module. One PV example you might see, a lot of the incursions, in fact, every incursion fleet I've ever seen is relying on logistics boats to prevent you from dying instead of your own tank management. But sometimes you can be hit quite hard unexpectedly for a while, and it ends up being a showdown between rat DPS and Logi rep power. Overheating here will drop your cycle duration by 15% and may keep that ship from going explodies. And now, usually people talk about the skills needed to do something, but we'll talk about skills later because the skill bonuses make a lot more sense once you have an idea of what's going on when you're overheating to begin with. Yes, pale explodies is a real world. Why not? Mechanics. How to see what overheating a module will do, and you want to know what your modules are going to do if you overheat, because it will differ for each module variant. As I said, guns will cycle shorter, but a shorter cycle time won't do much for a tank that's permanently on. So you want to check and see it. And you can see that under the right-click module. Feel free to follow along. So, for example, I'm looking at a 1600 millimeter item, which is a poor choice because a armor plate doesn't get overheated. Ha! Alright, enam. Right-click that, show info. Under the Attributes tab, you're going to scroll down. Scroll. Seriously, is there not friggin' overheat on here? Wow. Yes, some items don't have... There we go. Pick one of those. You're going to scroll down, and you can see two little, at the very bottom, squiggly fire items. And you're going to see heat damage, and you're going to see overload duration bonus. The overload duration bonus is what happens when you're overheating. So in the example of the hull ripper, you can see that it's negative 15, which means that the duration of the module, how long it takes for that module to cycle, is shorter by 15%. Heat damage, however, refers to what the problem is, refers to the damage that the module will take. As I said there, in the interest of balancing, eventually your module, if you overheat it long enough, will have problems. And in order to see an image that shows you your heads-up overview, pretty much, John. It's not guaranteed every cycle, but most cycles you'll hit it. It's kind of a random hit thing, which you can kind of look at overheating in two ways. You can either look at it with a lot of the math involved, and if you want to go to the E-UNI wiki, there is a lot of math and a lot of discussion about the chances and randomness and that sort of thing. Each module has 40 HP. So when it says the heat damage to the structure HP, they mean the structure of the module, not to your whole ship. So if you want to click on that second link, that will bring up a great big image in your in-game browser. Picture of when you're in space, the heads-up module, with your cap and all of that sort of stuff. And you'll see just above the cap is that little, and in between your structure points is another series of things. Each one of those three chunks refer to your high slots, your medium slots, and your low slots. And you can see that one of the little chunks is red, and that corresponds with the top row items that you see is also red. That red indicates that your module is taking heat damage. When the heat damage goes all the way across to that you see no more green, your module is unusable until you dock up and repair it. But it may or may not have saved your butt. You'll also see that the gun modules have a brighter green on them, which suggests that those ones are being overheating. So, yes, module structure, not ship structure.
So, can I ask something quick?
Yes.
What if you have a high resistance of heating? Will that reduce the damage?
Yes. There are a couple of skills which sort of reduce your overheating resistance, but not by a lot. There's nothing that will make you immune to overheating damage.
Okay, so it doesn't matter if I try heating.
It will help, but it will never completely negate it.
Okay.
But it won't ever help a lot, because overheating will generally burn through stuff a lot faster anyway. Levels is good. Actually, someone's waving at me and informing that it can make a bit of difference, but it's like everything else. You can train it and get it a lot better, or you can train it a little bit, and it will still help you. It's just a matter of how much you want to burn things out.
All right. I was looking thermic armor compensation is what I meant. Or that actually help you reduce to take the amount of damage.
If you overheat one of your armor resist modules, yes, that will temporarily, so long as you haven't burned your module out, will prevent your damage being taken.
Okay.
Alright, so back to where we were. The way you turn on overheating. Pale. You just dock up, do the regular repair thing. The problem with that sometimes is that you're not going to be in a position tactically that's going to let you dock up. You might be off in the middle of nullsec in a bunch of unfriendly places where they've either got, or even in lowsec where they have, say, a station camped, or out in nullsec you might be in enemy territory and they won't let you dock at their stations. So the goal is never to burn out your module if you can help it. Ellen's no logistics cannot repair. Yourself and Wolfgren, I will get to those. Thank you. Those will show up later in the discussion. Right, so back to how long you can overheat a mod sort of depends a bit on your skills. An EFT actually now will give you a rough idea. It's all random, so there's no set time, but and you click the little, you can see how there's a little mod icon, I don't have it up with me, but where you can turn the module on and off. And you can also cycle it through overloading, and up on the side next to where normally where the ranges in your guns show up, will show you overheating. And it'll show you roughly how long your module will have before you burn it out. It'll also show a bunch of numbers which tell you the chance that the module surrounding the module that you're overheating will last. Because it's not just the module that you're overheating that will take damage. Eventually, if you overheat it long enough, the stuff surrounding it will too. Sanctus, it's just a matter of working or not. Having partial damage won't affect it. The only thing that affects it is if you completely burn it out, and then it won't work at all. If you completely burn out that tank module, then it's no longer available to you until you get it repaired. That said, docked up in a station, there is no module that can ever be completely destroyed. You will always be able to repair it and fix it back to working, so it's not like all of a sudden your guns or your tank modules or your warp or whatever will become disposable. But if you're out in the middle of nowhere, you try not to completely screw up your modules, because then they're no good to you at all. So, how do you turn on overheating? All you have to do, right-click your module in space, turn on overheating. Of course, that only works once you have the skills trained. But like I said, we're kind of doing things backwards because the usage is more important than training the skills, and the skills make more sense once you understand the usage. Not to my knowledge. I don't think it has anything to do with it. Okay, so going back to that heads-up display that I posted earlier, the chunk that's red in the middle, that's called your heat meter, sitting between your cap and your hull. As you overload something, heat will build up and the meter will eventually turn red. Heat's rule of thumb is that a small ship generates a lot of heat, while ships can produce considerably less. Tona Rocker, no, there is not a slideshow. If you want to, however, you can go to the E-UNI's wiki page and look up overheating, and there's usually a pretty comprehensive discussion there. This is kind of a basic anecdotal discussion because most people probably haven't heard of overheating yet, probably haven't had it trained yet. That's why it's only a 101 class. So, as I said, heat's rule of thumb, smaller ships heat, larger ships will generate less heat because there's more ship to go around to disperse it. The meter is a direct representation of a module that a module will take damage. If a module is sitting at 50% heat, if the meter is sitting at 50% heat, then you have a 50% chance of the module taking damage, roughly. That said, anecdotal research suggests that you never quite get 100% hit chance either. So, the longer it's overheating, the more likely you're going to take damage, but it's not a guarantee. Heat will not spread between rack sizes, so if you're overly loading your gun rack, your high slots, your mid slots will be unaffected. Heat will build up much faster than it dissipates, and that's regardless of ship type, and it sort of seems to dissipate uniformly. Modules take damage based on their heat damage value under the Attributes tab, and it's modified by the Thermodynamics skill. As I said before, all modules have 40 HP, so when your module takes damage, it's directly given by your module's heat damage. Eventually, they'll accrue enough damage that they are offline. And as I said, that's when you burn your module out. Again, no module is ever destroyed and can be revived by repairing at a station. However, heat's not taken every chance cycle. It's still a chance-based thing. Now for the exciting bit, heat will spread between modules on a ship, as in through its own rack. So primarily it'll affect the modules placed next to the module you're overloading, and the amount of heat damage spread will be identical to the modules, i.e. the same damage the overloaded module takes will be the damage value the nearby module takes. And I'm going to link another picture here. So if you click on that, you can see it is the fittings picture or image of a hurricane. And you can see they kind of have their gun slots grouped a little bit funny. You see 2 gun slots, and then you see a newt, and then 2 more guns, and then a newt, and then 2 more guns. Neutralite, these classes are done periodically, all times, depending on whenever there's an instructor available to teach it and they have the time. So, what's happened basically is that this pilot has used those newts as a heat sink. They'll overload their guns, it doesn't show them how they're grouped on their screen, but it may be that they have the guns also grouped in sets of 2. So rather than having 6 individual guns, they have 3 sets of 2 guns. And it may be that they're firing them individually and they might choose to overload 1 or 2 of them and that sort of thing. And the modules in between will prevent the heat from group 1 to spreading into group 2 and from group 2 to spreading into group 3 and vice versa. Alternately, you may just have all of the guns grouped together into one gun set so that there's only one button that controls all 6 guns. But when you overheat all of your guns, the heat will spread in between the guns anyway, so. Small numbers, yes they are. Well done, I've never noticed that before. Alright, so he's got them grouped into 2 sets of 3, but you could group them however you want. And the idea is that, regardless of how your guns are grouped, when you overload the first set of guns, the 2 and then the one in the middle, being overloaded will pass heat onto gun number 2, but not so much, and the gun next to it in group number 1, but not so much the set in the other rest of the group. If you had all of your modules just jammed together and you overloaded all of them together, not only will each module take heat damage because you're overloading it, it will pass all of its heat damage on to its neighbors, and because its neighbors are also being overheated, well, you can see how that kind of can go pear-shaped really quickly. So that's a way to prevent your heat damage from spreading through as quickly. Oh, monkeys, I lost my other one. But there's basically a lot of people, some people, depending on how much effort they want to put into it, will put in quite a lot of time dealing with how to arrange your modules. And then, by the way, how your modules are arranged on your heads-up display, that is, when you're out in space, you can pick them up and drag them around. That doesn't affect your heat damage, only how your modules are arranged in the fitting window. Okay, I've completely lost that extra item that I was looking for. That's awkward. Yeah, basically, the long and short of that little ramble aside was that if you go to the E-UNI wiki, there are people who have done a lot of experimentation on module placement. If you're the kind of person who enjoys that much detail, feel free to go check it out. I'm not. I don't enjoy teaching it. I don't fly that way. I'm kind of a seat-of-my-pants kind of pilot. So, all of this is generally referred to as overheating kung fu. And your sneakiness. So what it comes down to is how your modules are placed determines how much heat gets spread through your racks. And also probably the key important thing in using overheating is the judicious turning on and turning off. My general preference of flying overheating stuff is to turn them on in bursts. So you overheat for a couple of rounds and then you turn it off. And let the heat dissipate if you can. Turn it on for a couple of rounds and then turn it off. And it's all turned on, turned off by right-clicking your module in space. Turn on overheat, turn off overheat. If you don't want your stuff overheating by accident, you can lock the whole rack, either on or off, or turning overheating on or turning overheat off, and you can lock it that way so you don't accidentally overheat something and accidentally burn your modules out, which is important. I've done that once or twice. It's pretty rough, especially, again, when you're nowhere near anywhere that you can duck up and repair. Speaking of repair, now that you are either with a module that's partially damaged or showing some red, or you've completely burned out your module, you need to fix it and fork over some ISK, or for times when you're unlikely to be near a station, or if you're off in the middle of a wormhole, or you're super busy and don't want to take the time to go to a station, but you might have some time to online modules while lining up for the next move. For example, incursion sites. You bring in the EVE equivalent of duct tape, nanite paste, which a couple of people posted up earlier. And if I could get them to post it up again, that would be excellent. Nanite paste is produced from planetary interaction products now, but it's been around much longer than the Tyrannus update. It's a consumable item that you can carry in the cargo bay of your boat. It does cost more than just docking up, but some modules will be very cheap to repair, while others will be very expensive. So you kind of have to just figure that out, which ones are cheaper, which ones aren't, and whether it's worth it to you or not. To use nanite repair paste in your cargo hold to repair a damaged module, and you have to make sure the module is not cycling, so it has to be turned off, so you don't want to be anywhere where you need that module running. You can right-click the module on your HUD and select Repair. It will then start flashing brightly, and when the repairs are finished or cancelled, it will consume paste from your cargo hold. If you don't have enough paste to effect repairs of the selected modules, it will tell you so much and it won't even start the repairs. Best thing about paste, you don't need a skill to use it. However, there are a couple of skills which affect its consumption and function, which brings us to the skills segment. There's really only 3 skills to deal with overheating, and 2 of them are more to do with nanite paste usage than overheating itself. There's Thermodynamics. This allows you to overheat your modules to begin with, and it gives a bonus of 5% reduction of heat per level, which you'll recall is the damage mechanic applied to overheating. It also gives the ability to frown on anyone in annoyance whenever you hear someone mention a perpetual motion unit. Ha! Technically, this is the only skill you need to have to overheat something. You probably want to take this guy to 4. 5's a long haul, but it can make a difference. So that one's kind of up to you. Nanite operation allows you to use nanite paste and reduces nanite consumption by 5% per level. So functionally, it's cheaper to fix stuff. This is good if you're going to use nanite paste, and if you're not going to use nanite paste, don't worry about it. And then nanite interfacing. This gives you a 20% increase in the repair amount per second, so functionally this ends up fixing stuff faster for you. As a side note, when you run a search for nanite, you'll also see a skill called nanite control, but this doesn't have anything to do with nanite repair paste. So that's related to using boosters, so don't worry about that one. And that is kind of the end of my notes that I have, and I'm sure I've completely muffed up explaining this at least once or twice. So does anyone have any questions?
So do you recommend training thermodynamics to 5?
It's like everything else. If you're going to use overheating a lot, then probably it's worth it. If you're not going to use overheating a lot, if you don't like it, don't do it.
Okay.
Yourself, how do you lock overheating to off? So you want to be undocked, because it won't let you do this while you're docked. And since I need to remind myself how to do this, I'm going to undock now. Okay, so there are all of your modules, and then on your heads-up display on the right-hand side, there's 3 little buttons with a little dash and then 2 little dashes and kind of 3 little dashes. And you can press the button to overload your rack. If you don't want to do that, if you want to lock your rack, you can... Oh, monkey crap, they seem to have changed that. Ah, okay, they moved it. So instead of the 3 little dots, down by the bottom corner there's sort of 3 little lines, and if you hover over it, it says Options. Click on that, and assuming that you have everything turned off, there is the lock overload status. Yes, I find swearing about monkeys much more satisfying than traditional swearing. So you can lock your overload status, and provided that you're not locking anything, you can't unlock it. And then if you right-click your modules, it no longer gives you the option to lock something. Go back, you can unlock overload status, and then you're free to turn on overload again. And you can unlock individual racks, I think. No, you can't. I lied. And I think someone was about to ask a question again.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
For example, damage control 1 is a low slot module.
Yeah.
But it doesn't show that I can use thermodynamics on it. Is it because the module itself doesn't allow me, or?
That is correct. There are some modules which you can't overload. Damage control is one of them. You can't overload armor plate. There are a few things that you can't.
Okay.
Somewhere, I think probably on the E-UNI wiki, there is a list of every single item that is overloadable and what the overload bonus is, if you care to go and look it up.
Okay, then.
Any other questions? Nothing? Crickets? Does anyone have any questions? Oh, yep. Eins, I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. The common usages are logistics pilots overloading their rep modules when they're trying to save someone's butt in the face of quite a lot of extra incoming damage. You might overload your afterburner or your micro warp drive if you either need to burn out to someone while you're tackling really, really quickly, or if you need to burn back to a gate and jump through and get away from someone. You might overload your warp disruptors or scrams on range to get more range out of them if you're far enough away. Overload your tanking modules to give you better resists. Or you could overload guns to either get a rate of firing bonus, so that means they cycle faster, or you could get a damage bonus if you would really need to put someone down that much faster. And usually in the small dogfights that aren't the gigantic uni slugfests, yeah, the overheating will make a difference because of how short of the fights tend to be. You know, I don't know if mining turrets and strippers can be overloaded. Probably not. I've never used them. And even if you did, it probably wouldn't justify the cost of having to repair the stuff all the time. Yourself, probably the best way to turn on overload is not necessarily to overload your whole rack if overloading your whole rack doesn't do you anything. So you want to just right-click the module the only thing that you want overloading.
If you put a certain module offline, and you overload the rack, will that also affect the offline module?
It will, but usually if someone has an offline module and they're overheating, they're using it as a heat sink, i.e. something to absorb heat damage to protect their modules that they do actually want.
Okay.
But yes, it'll still affect it.
And does Thermodynamics favor certain ships over others?
No. No, it's pretty much all modules, all ships. I don't think there's any ship in the game that gives a bonus to it.
Okay, very nice.
The green bar on the top is the overload for that specific module. The green bar is more like whether its module is online or not. Yourself, pretty much. If you ever turn off a module, you'll see it also goes kind of gray and red. Or if you completely burn it out, it's completely red. It's kind of a general purpose, how bad the module is doing, as opposed to specifically overloading. But yes, it's for that module. Any other questions? Any questions not specifically relating to overheating that I may or may not be able to answer? Aries, well, I can tell you exactly. It makes a 15% difference, only because I happen to be looking at the gun example. If you need to put out 15% more firepower, either in damage or in rate of fire, yeah, it can make a difference in short one-on-one fights, or if you need to put someone down. It seems like it would make less of a difference in a large group, generally speaking, as far as guns go. Where it'll make a big difference is in a couple of people fights, 2 or 3 people, where you need to drop one person really quickly. So, hypothetically, yeah, it would make a difference by making it go 15% faster, or if someone would die 15% faster, for example. And again, the place you're going to see it most is in the small person dogfights. A couple of people. I'm not sure, but I would certainly be happy to believe that. Yeah, I'm looking at my 1MN micro warp drive, that has probably twice as much heat damage as anything else I've looked at, so yes, they would burn out the fastest. Or very likely, but they're also the one that you're most likely to use, and the one you're most likely going to see some of the biggest performance changes out of, the obvious ones at any rate. But again, it's also always worth overheating your tank modules when you get primaried if something like that happens to you. Not so much, again, if you've got 30-odd battleships staring you down and you're in a cruiser, but... Alright, any other questions? It differs areas depending on what the module is. For example, a great big large gun will cost more to repair than a small gun will. Wolgren, I'm not sure about that. I believe they said the mining ones aren't. But it's not worth to overload a mining example either. Alright, that's it. I guess that's it. Thanks for coming, and thanks for listening to me ramble, and have a good day.